There was a commercial that ran a few years ago, which portrayed a man in the hospital who was suffering from, and I quote, money coming out of the wazoo. Now, if any of you viewing this presentation are afflicted with this condition, may I merely say, bless you, and that this is only one in a series of presentations that Swarfrat Enterprises offers. But the majority of us, well, we have to make careful choices when it comes to spending our discretionary income. Now, I'm very much like a kid in a candy store when I browse a catalog or an internet machinery site. There's so much out there that I know I could have fun with. But it all boils down to differentiating between what I need and what I want. So in the spirit of that principle, we're going to try and help point out what you'll most likely need to begin using your mini-mill productively and to help you make an informed decision. I would like to take a moment and assure you that I am in no way affiliated with the products that I'm about to show you, and I don't benefit from your purchasing any of them. Also, any prices I may mention are estimates that are roughly accurate at the time of this presentation. Having said that, let's begin. For starters, you'll have to have a way of clamping your workpieces to the mill table. Now, this is a very comprehensive 52-piece kit which can be found at a variety of retailers who specialize in mini machines. This is a great starter kit, and we'll be discussing it in the next portion when we get to basic clamping principles. Most of the time, you're also going to need something to support your work off of the actual table itself. Now, you'll need a variety of precision blocks for this purpose. These are the popular 1, 2, 3 blocks, and they are an extremely useful pair. They are so called because they measure 1 by 2 by 3 inches. There are 2, 4, 6 blocks, but for our mini machines, the 1, 2, 3s will normally be the most practical. You can see that the blocks are riddled with holes. This enables all sorts of clamping and supporting strategies. The central 5 holes on the main face are also tapped to accept the studs from your clamping kit. Now, this makes it possible to join the blocks to other fixtures and setups, as well as to each other, to form specialized angle plates. These blocks are hardened and ground square to 2/10,000ths of an inch, and they can be had very inexpensively. Another type of block that you'll most likely need is the V block. Now, these are perfect for securing round stock or for turning square stock at a 45-degree angle. There are many sizes and types. The 2 sizes shown here are very practical for the mini mill. These also are ground square to around 2/10,000ths of an inch, and because of that accuracy, they can also double as precision support blocks. Because of the V-notch, they're great for supporting flat stock while leaving a recess underneath to allow for boring and drilling operations, and they can be used this way vertically or laying on their sides. Some V-blocks come with their own clamps that straddle the block and hold the workpiece securely. These are great to have, but they do cost about 3 times as much as these simple V-blocks. So you can decide if the extra cost is warranted by the convenience that you need for your setups. But these simple blocks are practical for every hobby machinist, budget or not. The next item is the Screwless Vice. Now, this will save you so much time and hassle with milling small parts that you're going to want to remember me in your wills for mentioning it to you. This is a precision unit with the sides and body hardened and ground flat and parallel to the usual 2/10,000ths of an inch. This makes it a breeze to square up on the mill bed. The jaws in this vise will open up nearly 4 inches, and you should be able to see on the picture that there are horizontal and vertical V-grooves cut into the movable back jaw. These will hold small pieces of round stock beautifully. A very valuable companion to this screwless vise is a set of parallels. Now, these are used to precisely support your work in the vise jaws, making sure it's square and accurate. These are also precision ground and hardened and come in a variety of sizes and lengths. This particular set is 10 pairs of 6-inch long parallels ranging from 1/2 to 1 5/8 inches tall. Now, for the small vise we showed you, you can get these in 3-inch lengths. The price is about the same, and you don't end up with 3 inches of parallel hanging out of the vise and possibly getting in the way of the column or hand wheel. But if you ever use larger machines or need the parallels for other uses, the 6-inch set isn't bad to have. It's a toss-up really, so go with whatever feels right for you. Now, you may feel that you can get by without a vise at all, and that could well be the case. But if you're planning on using a vise on your mill other than one designed for milling, please don't be fooled. Vices used for mills need to be vices designed for mills. Aside from the high forces applied to the vise itself, there's the matter of jaw rise, which happens when you tighten the vise on the workpiece. This is a standard drill press vise. It's very solid, strong, and totally unsuitable for milling. Let me set up a piece of stock and I'll demonstrate why. We'll take a pair of parallels and place them in the vise. I sometimes like to put a small piece of foam between the parallels to keep them separate and flush with the sides. If you do this, just make sure the foam doesn't get between the parallels and the vise or the stock that we're going to be putting on top of them. Next, we'll take a small block of aluminum and place it on top of the parallels, aligning it, and then we'll just snug the vise. Now I'm putting a dial indicator on top of the block so that you can see what happens as we tighten the vise. As the jaws tighten, they buckle upwards, allowing the stock to rise up nearly 30 thousandths from where we want it. And that's obviously going to destroy the accuracy of any setup, because not only is the stock higher than it should be, but because of the buckling action, it's canted to one side. You can see that it's no longer even resting on the parallels. The screwless vise, on the other hand, uses an entirely different principle to tighten its jaws. It pulls down as it tightens. And let's put it to the same test. We'll load the parallels just as we did before. And then we'll place our test stock on top of them. And we'll snug the vise. With the dial indicator in place, we're ready to begin tightening. And here we go. Using an Allen wrench, we'll snug the vise down. The needle barely moves 1/4 of a thousandth of an inch. The work is positioned exactly where we need it to be positioned. Now, when you see the big difference between the common drill press vise and the screwless vise, it's pretty easy to understand why we consider it an essential basic piece of gear. If you're going to be doing precision work, you'll need some precision measuring equipment to measure it. Thanks to overseas equipment manufacturers, the hobby machinist can afford to have accurate measuring tools at a fraction of professional machinist prices. For instance, the dial indicator on the far right is a late 60s model and probably cost somewhere between $50 and $100 at that time. I bought the dial indicator in the far upper left in 1982 with a special stand for motorcycle cylinder work. It cost me around $220 if I remember right. But I bought the unit directly below it in 2003 and paid around $10. It works just fine, and it'll accurately measure out thousandths of an inch all day long. I don't expect it'll last 40 years, but at the price I don't really care. For milling, perhaps even more important than the dial indicator is a test indicator, like the two in the middle of the picture. A test indicator is a bit different than a dial indicator in that the probe swings back and forth as opposed to traveling up and down. Now, you might be able to see in this picture that the unit measures in increments of 1/2 thousandth of an inch. This one has a 7 joule movement, and it was a bargain at less than $30. We'll use test indicators for everything from squaring up stock in our mills to tramming the mill head. On that matter of squaring, you'll need a machinist square. Professional quality squares can cost upwards of $100 each, but again, Indian or Chinese units can provide all the accuracy we'll need at a fraction of the cost. This small set is perfect for mini mill work. And to measure the size of our work, we'll need calipers. The top unit is a 12-inch caliper, which is a bit large for most hobby use. The two beneath are 6-inch. The bottom one is electronic. It does all kinds of neat stuff. It'll switch between metric and inch at the push of a button. The numbers read on a nice large LCD screen. It's very nice, but it's really not necessary. The unit above it is the old-fashioned dial version, and it reads in both metric and inch simultaneously, and it's perfect for our uses. Either can be had inexpensively, but the dial version is usually half the cost of the electronic. A good feeler gauge set will come in handy for all sorts of checks and will be used by you to set your beginning mill cuts, and we'll discuss that in a later lesson. You can find them at hardware stores, tool trucks, and auto parts stores anywhere. Another handy gizmo is the protractor. Now, rather than trying to sight angles off a cheapy plastic one you've horked from your kid's school backpack, this nice metal unit is very accurate and it'll last you for years. We aren't going to get into actual cutting in this session, so there are other costs that you're going to incur in getting different cutting tools, arbors, collets, and holders. And those will be covered in another lesson, but it should help you to know that there are also ways to cut starting costs there too. Now, we can't cover everything you might possibly need to get started, but I think we did go over the basics pretty well. So, when you're ready, we'll move on and attack the basic principles of clamping.